What's up, everybody? How you doing today? Welcome to a very sunny day in Bangkok. It's still pretty cloudy since the rainy season basically started several weeks ago. The last couple days have been pretty overcast, but today the sun is breaking through, and I'm going to take advantage of that today and get more sun. And this is also what I've come to learn is quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is a concept that I actually didn't know I was doing over the last couple years, since I realized that I really dislike where I work, and I was just tired of dealing with the environment and feeling like I wasn't getting anywhere, no recognition, and it just was a constant drain on my soul, my emotions, and my whole attitude. I was grumpy and snappy, and it just work just became something that wasn't very pleasant. So I started doing things that were to tolerate the situation a little more, and I came to understand it's called quiet quitting, and I kind of like that. So today's a bit of a quiet quitting day. I still do my job. I'm still on call. I still will go back to my office. I just won't, or in my desk. I am working from home today, but you just don't do that extra. I'm going to do a separate video on that. I think it's a very interesting topic. But anyway, this is somewhat relevant today. I got my notes. These are some of my thoughts of since I started this channel, and I started thoughts over the years that I just started writing down, and I'm really glad to get these down and make video about them and talk about them, because maybe some of you out there are in the same situation. By the way, this is Choice. I'm from Winding Down Chronicles of an Expat Going into Early Retirement in Southeast Asia. I'm not retired yet, but I am getting there, and every day is one step closer. Worst case scenario, depending on how you look at it, I will be my contract ends within the next year, so next June. So we've got one more year left, or depending on the organizational planning that we're doing and the budget cuts. If we get more budget cuts, I could be one of the positions that's let go earlier. So I could be let go. I could be gone I could be done working for this particular chapter of my life by probably as early as September, which I doubt, or even as late as June next year. But I'm guessing if there's budget cuts, I will lose my job intentionally. I will put myself on the chopping block because I'm ready to stop sometime by the end of the year. I think December would be the most. So anyway, this is partly a channel on how to transition into retirement, the issues, questions, doubts that someone might have, especially if you're living in Southeast Asia or interested in coming to Southeast Asia. But yeah, before I go into anything else, the subject today is going the extra mile is a scam. And I only really thought that in my current work situation, because all the other jobs I had before. I come from a family with a very strong work ethic. You go the extra mile, and I'll share with you a little later why I don't think that really worked, at least for my father. But some other ways you might hear this going the extra mile is you take initiative. If you do evaluations in your organizations, they do evaluations, and you get scoring, which can be very subjective. There's not really any criteria, and quite frankly, my organization, nobody in it really takes it seriously at all. It's just an exercise, a futile exercise we go through to fulfill that HR obligation and to justify you not being fired, in a way. I guess that's what it is. In some ways, it's good to do personnel evaluations at work, to have that on file. It shows that you have a record of being a good employee. in case new management comes in or new boss comes in and you just don't get on together well. You might need that as a record, you know. But my organization, there's no incentive for pay raises from it. You can have exceeding expectations across the board, but you don't get anything from that. You know, it's a cursory thank you by your supervisor, and then that's it. So on our evaluations, you select for each category or based on your goals for the year. You have exceeds expectation, meets expectation, and below expectation. The other reason the personnel evaluations are important is if you do have a problem child in the organization, you do want record to show that there was some evaluation assessment and you're not being arbitrary with someone just because you don't like them. You need to show some type of record to prevent yourself from being sued eventually if the employee tries to give you a trouble or tries to dispute any kind of allegation or something that's not very substantive, not proven. It's just kind of an opinion from your boss. So I've seen that happen where it gives you a good record in case you do have a problem, but it also gives you a way to get rid of an employee to show if they are really below expectation and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Another term you'll hear for this is do it for the team. These are a bit of more of a manipulation, and especially when the team is viewed as like you're a family. A couple years ago, I always cringed at the welcome from an organization when staff would start saying, "Welcome to the family," and I always cringed at that because I'm like, I'm not your brother, I'm not your friend, I'm not your sister, I'm not your cousin, I'm not your father or uncle. And generally, the higher up in the position you are, they tend to look at you like Papa or Dad, or Mama, the Mama of the organization. We had one of those where I'm working, but families are dysfunctional. I love my family, but I don't think I would want to work with them. I love my siblings. I love my parents, but I would not want to work for them. Because families are dysfunctional, and you've got the creepy uncle, and I'm just using an example. I'm just citing examples, not necessarily from my particular family, but you have a lot of dysfunction is allowed in the family because you're family. You're not there's no accountability. There might be some disciplining, but you can't fire your family. You could, I guess you could get a divorce. People do that. And you could disown, but that's very extreme. Generally, you allow and you tolerate things that normally intolerable behavior. And an organization should work like a football team, a sports team, a basketball team. You are accountable. You have a job to do and you do it. And everybody holds you accountable, especially the supervisors and your peers. So when I walk into an organization, they're like, "Welcome to the family." I'm like, ooh. So the concept I learned a couple years ago. I think it was from Darren Daly. I think it was that was the name of it. I can't remember the name. I followed some self-help gurus and some self-improvement gurus for a while, and he really he made the concept clear to me and why I was so opposed to this term "welcome to the family" when I joined an organization. He's like, you're a team. You get paid, you do a job, and you do it well, and you hold each other accountable. And the organizations that thrive and are efficient and do well are those kinds of organizations, and I would say I'm not in one of them right now. The people are good. I enjoy most of them, but they do operate like a family, and things that would not be tolerated are tolerated. Especially the accountability part. I think that's the hard part for me. So anyway, I said that my parents were very hardworking people. You know, they were on that edge of Depression era, right? Coming out of the Depression era and going into the start of the baby boomers. They definitely weren't a baby boomer mentality. They were Depression era Depression era thinking mentality. Very frugal, hardworking. You work for the man. You bring home the bacon, and you support your family. I know they did it for love for the family, but the work ethic went beyond what was required of them, especially for my dad. You know, my mom loved the work. You know, she loved being productive, and she was very friendly and tolerant, and she didn't have any jobs that required too much amount of management of people. You know, they were kind of isolated. She worked as a team with people, so she didn't really have to manage people that often. And I think that's where things really get more complicated. My dad, on the other hand, I mean, he found almost his entire purpose in work. His self-worth was wrapped in work, and I just saw a very miserable person. You know, I think that was part of his personality. You know, he was a loner, but you know, he worked his job. I mean, he would leave for work an hour before he was supposed to start, and he was always there at least 30 minutes before work. I mean, so there was an hour going to work, and there was an hour coming home from work, and just very loyal, very dependable. You know, if it was a 20-minute lunch, that's all he took, was a 20-minute lunch. But my dad had a couple of things happen to him over the years. I mean, I knew he went the extra mile at work. He went the extra mile, and I think back in those days it was more recognized in some ways. But when it comes down to it, the organization is going to protect themselves. If there's a situation where you can show you've been the most exemplary employee your entire life, but if it comes down to survival between you and the organization, whatever you've done in the past is worth nothing. I'll give two examples. My father, when he was 25, he was a telephone repairman, and he fell 50 feet down to his head. You know, he landed on his head, and he became deaf from that partially, and there might have been some other damage there, but you know, this was back in the 70s, so you know, back then they probably wouldn't have been much better with the medical care as there was, but I think it was partially due to faulty equipment, and suing was not even a question in our mind, ever, as far as I ever remember from my family. Only until the last couple 20 years, I would say, you know, lawsuits have been a discussion about incidents with our family at work, but we've never done it. And I think my dad didn't get anything from that. He got his medical bills paid, and that was it. And then my dad was in another accident, you know, when he were later in his career. You know, he was always a blue collar worker, so he was in a truck accident. You know, another employee ran into him with the truck, and he came home. I mean, it was pretty bad, and he passively told us about it and did nothing. There was no follow-up from the organization. This is a big organization from where I'm from, and there was nothing from the organization to compensate him for, or even, I don't think he went for medical care, and he just let it go. You know, suing was not an issue, and making a complaint was never an idea for us. But I'm just saying, you know, so then an example for my mother. She worked, 2, 3 jobs most of her life when she could. Part of it was to raise, to put food on the table for us. She worked for this company, Redner's Market, and I think it's a regional chain. She was there for 30 years. Loyal customer every day. Rarely took sick. My parents almost never took sick. And she was getting older. She had a couple of replacements done in her hips and her knees. And she was in her late 60s. And she asked the corporation if she could sit. She managed the front desk, which was basically where they count the money, they do the lottery tickets and customer service, things like that, kind of overseeing the cashiers in a way, but basically responsible for the money. Never really any management of people. But she, in the supermarkets are extremely cold. I mean, you need a jacket to go in there. So here she is in her 60s, 30 years working for these people, for this company, and the job required her to stand her entire 10 hours. It required her to stand, even just to count money and sitting at a desk. She did have to go. Did have to move to go to a window, but when she was counting money and not busy at the window, she had to stand at the desk counting money. They wouldn't let her sit, and the older it got, the more she kind of complained about it to us, our kids, and we were like, "You have to complain, about this," and she wouldn't do it. She said they won't allow me to sit. Even the cashiers, they were younger people, but I think they had to stand also. Anyway, so after 30 years on the job, totally committed, and she had to leave the job because she couldn't take standing anymore. And instead of insisting or, even potentially suing the organization for this, I think it was malpractice. She just left. And you know what she got after 30 years of service? She got a plastic plaque, like a thank you for 30 years of service. One of those little silicone or plastic plaques. Thank you. And I think she might have gotten a certificate for like $100 for something at the supermarket. That was it. That was her recognition after 30 years going the extra mile. I have a number of instances personally. My job does require me to be available on the evenings and weekends and holidays. I'm on call on the holidays. Like I said before, I have not had any holiday where I've not had to work. I go home back to the U.S. every 2 years. I've had my boss send me work while I was on the plane, and when I land in the U.S., I've got emails for something I need to work on ASAP for a deadline because no one else can do it. I think part of that is it's my responsibility, but there's no one else at the organization who could do it, and that's partly the organization's responsibility. But I'm taking it on myself that I need to do this or the organization could have a big problem. So I'm spending my first day or two working on budgets and reports for the organization. The one that really gets me the most is a year and a half ago, I lost my mother to a drunk driver, killed her. And the course is still pending. The court case is still pending, but I made a special trip to go home to visit to bury my mother. 2 days after I buried her, I was contacted by the organization for a couple urgent reports to prepare. So 2 days after I buried my mother, and I've never experienced any kind of pain in my life that I did to losing my mother. It just because it was so sudden. If someone is dying from age, you can kind of prepare for that. But my mother's life was taken from me in an instant. I talked to her one day, next day she was gone. And but the organization, I had to do. I'm sitting with my sisters. We're all mourning, and I had to shut my emotions down to do a couple reports. 2 days after burying my mother, and then 2 weeks after that, I had to bury my dad. He died on my mother's birthday. But I just was like, this is it. I really can't do this anymore. I mean, it's just the work consumes you. And you know what? None of this will matter. Those reports, they mattered at the time, but if I'm at odds with my boss and peers at work, everything I did, all the extra miles I went for work, the extra, working on working on the weekends, being on call, losing my leave, not being able to mourn my parents. What did it get me? I'm going to lose my job, and they're going to say thank you. They're going to try and get out of paying what they owe me. They could, and I can't stop it. And it's like, there's that song that says, what have you done for me lately? And that's really what it is. So don't be manipulated. Don't be manipulated by we're a family, do it for the team. So anyway, my conclusion is I've come down to 3 reasons why you could if you go the extra mile, these are 3 reasons why you should do it. And if you can't do it for these 3 reasons, then I wouldn't do it. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth the emotional resentment you could have to an organization or to your peer or to your boss. I some of this subject is a little fresh for me, so it might sound a little salty and emotional, but for the most part I'm not anymore, because I've come to these conclusions. So I'm just kind of adding emphasis to the subject. But the first reason is do it for yourself, personal satisfaction. Make it an intentional. Don't expect any praise for it. Don't expect any praise. Don't expect your boss to remember in a week, a year, or a couple years down the road. Remember that time that you took all that time off and came in after work, and don't expect it. Don't expect that you're going to get a raise from it. I've had, I would say my previous bosses, some cases I was recognized. But I went to places and took jobs that a lot of people wouldn't want to have. So I did show myself, and I earned the experience. But this leads me to that first point. You do it for yourself. And the second point is do it for the skills. Do it for the personal skills you're going to gain from it. The experience, the stories that you can tell to your next employer. And all of the difficult times and extra miles that I did take in the past, they've made me better at work. They made me better at what I do, because I was willing to do the painful, make the painful decision to do more than what my job really required from me. So do it for yourself, and do it for the skills and experience you're going to learn, and the stories you'll be able to tell, and to hopefully move yourself up into a higher job if that's your interest. And then finally, this is the biggest one for me. Do it for the Lord. Do it for God. God sees us. God sees everything. I think God has us here for a purpose. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We're to serve God. And it's one of the reasons why I got into the work I'm in now, because I wanted to help people, and I felt like that's what we're here for. We're to help people in need and underprivileged people, and that's really what I wanted to do. We won't get don't expect the praises from man, but do expect the benefits. If you do them wholly unto God, that He will bless them, and that there will be reward for that if you work unto Him. So you just want to be, management is changing. That's the other point you want to think about, at the office. Your boss may love you now, but as soon as he or she goes, your new boss might not like you. And I've seen that happen. So everything you might have done is gone. The only thing that remains constant is God. He sees everything. So don't lose heart, and just remember that He's the one who will bless you for it. God doesn't change. He sees everything. So anyway, this was a bit of an emotional subject for me, because I do remember a lot, coming from my work ethic. I'm quietly quitting now, but I do my job. I'm always on call. I mean, I think it does even out in the end. I'm certainly not taking advantage of the situation, but it's an interesting concept anyway. Just remember, you need to do it for yourself, for your personal benefit, the soft benefits of it, the experience and the skills that you'll learn, and do it for God. It's the only way that any of this makes it worth it, and the only permanent way for it to always be remembered and be part of the bigger picture. So that's all I have for now. Again, thanks for joining me. I guess I went off on this a little longer than I expected. Thank you for joining me in this part of the world. Anyway, take care, and God bless, and do it for God. Until the next time, take it slow.